Okay, so I only have two more examples for us today. Remember our quadratic formula, it's the same thing that we did in class today. You may need to Google what the quadratic formula is if you don't already have that memorized. So you may want to take a second, pause the video, and either look it up or Google or sing it to yourself and get the quadratic formula written down at the top of your notes. All right, so today in class we talked about the quadratic formula and that the whole purpose is that it's going to give us exact roots. We talked about how when we have the quadratic formula, we look at parabolas, and we're looking at where our parabolas are crossing the x-axis. So this first one is an example of two real roots because it's going to cross twice. And then we talked about if it doesn't cross at all, right? That's an example of two imaginary roots. And we're going to add a little thing to this table today, which is why we're putting it at the top of our notes. All right, and then we also talked about this graph, which I didn't draw very well, that touches just one time, and we call that one double root. All right, so let's leave a space, maybe skip like 3 lines or so in your notes, leave some space, and we're going to come back and add to this after we do our examples. All right, so notice this first example, I've already done all the stuff that we did in class today for us. Remember, it has to equal 0 to begin with. So the first thing that I've done here is added 6x back. And so that it's in the right order, the 6x I actually put here in the middle. And then I did my A, B, and C. And then I've just set up my formula. Now you can just go ahead and copy everything that I have done so far, and we'll get started from there. If you remember in class, the first thing that we had to do was type in everything that's underneath this square root bar in our calculator. So you may want to pause and use your calculator, and let's make sure we can get the right thing. All right, and when I make sure to use all the parentheses correctly, I'm getting x equals -6 plus or minus the square root of 0 all over 2. All right, now this is a little odd because in class today, we said we were supposed to take this number and break it down, but you can't break 0 down. So instead, this becomes x equals -6 plus or minus 0 all over 2. Now, you don't even really have to write this step because, well, you do need to write that step because the square root of 0 is 0. And now that the square root symbol is gone, remember from class, we're ready to make our two cases. So our first case is to read the plus sign. X equals -6 plus 0 over 2. All right, and if I work that out, -6 plus 0 is -6 over 2. That gives me the answer x equals -3. And then we can also do our minus case, x equals -6 minus 0 over 2. Well, -6 minus 0 is still -6. Okay, so notice I'm getting the same answer twice. In your notes, you probably want to make a note that this is an example of a double root. It's where you're getting one answer, but you're getting it 2 different times, one when you do the plus and one when you do the minus. So it's important that you realize that this is an example of a double root. We'll go back. So let's go back to the top of our notes and make a little addition or a correction to something that we had written. Okay, so what we want to add here is that the one double root happens when you have the square root of 0. So anytime you're taking the square root of 0, you're going to end up adding or subtracting 0, which will give you the same answer 2 different times. All right, let's see what our other different case is. Okay, so again, this equation does not equal 0 yet, so I fixed it. I went ahead and added the 15, and to keep it in the right order, x squared, x, and then the number, the 15 goes at the end this time. All right, I pulled my A, B, and C out, and then I just plugged all that into the quadratic formula for us. So just like from class today, remember we're going to start with all of this underneath the square root symbol, and we are not going to type the square root symbol in. Okay, so when I do that, I'm going to get x equals, remember this negative 6, that's going to become positive, so positive 6 plus or minus square root, the square root of negative 84 all over 4. Now normally we would break this down, but there's an issue here. The 84 part is okay, it's the negative part that's a problem. Okay, so what I wanted you to do, you need to put like a big star in your notes. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. And in fact, the whole definition of square roots of negative numbers give us what we call imaginary numbers. So anytime you've got this square root of a negative number right here, we're going to call that no solution or imaginary. You would know that because if you tried to type in the square root of negative 84 on your calculator or on your phone or wherever, it should say error. It should not give you an answer. So we're going to say this is no solution, or, and this is even better, 2 imaginary solutions. All right, so let's go back and correct the top of your notes one last time. All right, so we added just a minute ago that our double root was when we had the square root of 0. Our imaginary roots happen if we take the square root of negative numbers. Any negative number is going to give us imaginary, which means, remember, that means it's not going to cross the x-axis at all. So 2 real roots, which is what we did in class together, we haven't done an example like that in your notes, so we did this together. Obviously, if you're not taking the square root of 0 or a negative number, the only numbers left to take square roots of are the square roots of positive numbers. And positive is then when we're going to like break down into our tree and look for pairs. So this is what you need in your notes. Make sure you've watched this and you are ready for class tomorrow with notes. You need to make sure you have written notes down. If all you did was watch the video and you didn't write notes, you're not ready.